Hey Giants fans, welcome back to Giants Latest. It's officially week 1, football season is here. So happy. And I mostly just hope that this excitement lasts through, week 2, week 3 would be great, but we'll see how things go. So what I wanted to focus on today is kind of just some basics on what this week is going to look like for the Giants, their scheduling, injuries, and stuff like that. And then later this week, as the days go on, we're going to talk through injury reports as they get them. And then we're going to talk about, predictions, how the Giants beat the Commanders and walk out of Northwest Field with a win. We're going to talk all about it, players to watch, you name it, we're going to discuss. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just talk about their schedule this week. So basically the league as a whole had a mandated 3 days off, which was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then Monday they were back in the building just for a walkthrough. So here's what their schedule looks like this week for anyone who's interested. So they had a walkthrough on Monday, Labor Day, and then media spoke to Dable and players via Zoom, so they were not in the building. And then they're off on Tuesday. Tuesday is typically the Giants off day, and I believe it's actually league-wide where Tuesday is the off day. At least I know that's usually been the case for the Giants over the years. So they have off Tuesday. Wednesday, they're all back in the building for their first and last padded practice of the week. That's it. They have one padded practice leading up to Sunday's game, which is interesting, but it is what it is. And Wednesday is when we're going to get a big update on Andrew Thomas. So that is when we're going to discuss, and I can't wait to get some insight onto that. And then something else that I wanted to point out with this is that, I have given Dable a lot of grief over the fact that the last few years they have started off extremely slow. They look unprepared, undisciplined, everything by the time week 1 rolls around. And Dan Duggan pointed out that this is an example of what Dable has done differently this year. So we'll see if it translates at all. So the way that this week's schedule is going to go, so they have a standard practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but Wednesday is the only padded practice. This week's schedule is yet another tweak by Dable. In the past, the Giants practiced Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, with the unconventional off day being Thursday leading into the opener. Now, this was not every week because, like I said, that Tuesdays was their off days, but leading into the opener, they had Thursday off, where now he switched it, and this week they have practice Thursday. Will that make a difference? I don't know. Maybe we'll find out on Sunday. If they come out looking competitive and looking like a football team that knows what the hell they're doing, then maybe that one practice or whatever other changes they have made will be obvious. So we'll see. And I like that Dan Duggan wrote, whatever it takes after going 68-8 in the past 2 openers. They have been outscored 68-8. So that's where we're at with that. So with that being said, let's talk through what's happening for the rest of the week. So Wednesday is the first injury report. Like I said, that's going to be the first indication as to whether or not we know if Andrew Thomas is going to be starting on Sunday. Now, I'm kind of feeling like he's not going to at this rate. I hope that I'm wrong. I would love nothing more than to see Andrew Thomas out there week 1 as the starting left tackle against the Commanders. But I just think that based on what we have seen and heard, I'm not so sure that one practice on Wednesday is going to be enough for them to say he's good to go. Again, you never know. So, couple players who have been dealing with some sort of injuries. So let's talk through this as we continue on talking about the injury report. So Theo Johnson has been banged up a little bit. No one knows what it is because Dable refuses to talk about it, but he did not play in the final preseason game, and since then he's been off to the side in practice and not really doing much. The same goes for wide receiver Dalen Cambry. Joshua Ezeudu was also put on some sort of injury list, so there's definitely a couple players who we hope are ready to go. Like Theo Johnson, would love to see him out there for week 1. And the thing with Theo is that they didn't keep Greg Dulcich. So they did keep 4 tight ends on the roster for right now. And I think that's going to continue into week 1. I don't think that's because Theo Johnson has been not fully practicing. I think if Theo Johnson's injury was pretty serious, then I think he would have been put on some sort of injury list and they would have kept Dulcich as their 4th. I think that's how things would have gone. So I'm kind of looking at the Theo situation as something that's not long-term, and hopefully he's going to be good to go for Sunday. But if we see him on Wednesday on the injury report, the ideal scenario is that he's listed as either limited practice or full practice. So again, we're going to get that Wednesday, the downside is I don't think we're going to get it till Wednesday afternoon, which means we might not be talking about it until Thursday, but TBD on that. We have to see, how things go when their practices. Hopefully it's in the morning like the training camp practices have been, and then we can be ready to go and talk all about it Wednesday afternoon. But I'm really curious to see what happens there. I think the goal for Theo this year in year 2 is that he's going to be a really big piece of this offense. He was doing really well last year before he went ahead and got injured. And even he said he felt like he was really hitting his stride. And the fact that he got injured when he did was such a bummer to him. So he also did say that he really focused this offseason on training and eating and made his body and, conditioning and all sorts of that has been a really big focus for him. Now, he's dealing with an injury, so I don't know whether or not that worked well, but, we'll see as things go on. Also, we do know that this training staff as a whole is extremely conservative when it comes to any type of injuries. So should not be a surprise at all that, anyone who might be dealing with something small is not ready to play or is on some sort of list. So we'll see what happens with that. But from everyone that I can remember who is dealing with some sort of injury, I believe that Theo Johnson is probably the most important one outside of Andrew Thomas, of course, on that list, because Dalen Cambry, Joshua Azudu, and some of the other guys, are not really starters. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move along to my predictions on who I think are going to be the starters across the board. So with that being said, I do briefly want to say that I believe that Tay Banks has been back at practice. He's been on the side. So that is going to be really interesting too, because I'm not 100% sure if he was back in drills, and because there's no injury reports yet, Dable is obviously not discussing it. So Banks is another name to watch, but let's go ahead and talk about the offense on what the starting lineup is going to look like. So the offensive line from left to right, I believe, is going to be James Hudson, John Runyon, John Michael Schmitz, GVR, and then Jermaine Illuminor. Evan Neal has obviously not proved that he is good enough to be the starting right guard. So GVR got the job. No questions asked there. That's what it's going to look like. The wide receivers, I don't think there's any questions there. It's going to be Wan'Dale Robinson, Darius Slayton, and Malik Neighbors, of course. And then I think we will see potentially a little bit of Jalen Hyatt. I think we'll see a little bit of Bo Collins, but obviously those 3 guys are getting the start. That's who we're going to see. I think there's also a possibility that we see a little bit of Gunner as the backup slot guy. But again, not a lot for week 1. I'm curious to see what kind of game plan they've come up with, but obviously Wan'Dale Robinson and those other guys are going to get the most targets, and we'll see how that plays up. From the running backs, I think we're going to see Tyrone Tracy right off the bat. He's going to be out there with the starters, and then I think we're going to see Devin Singletary as the second back who's rotated in. I think there's a possibility that we see a couple snaps from Scat, but because he's been dealing with this injury through a big part of the summer, I think that if we see Scat, it's going to be in very small doses from the get-go. But I think there's a possibility that we see a little bit of him, which is really exciting to me. Next up with the tight ends, I'm going to assume right now that Theo Johnson is either questionable, limited, or potentially not playing. With that being said, I think we're going to see Daniel Bellinger and Chris Manhertz as the 2 tight ends that we first see out there in that big group. Manhertz is going to be used primarily as a blocker, and then I think we could see Bellinger used as a pass catcher. I think that is the most likely scenario. I don't think we're going to see Thomas Fidone out there with the ones. Maybe, depending on how the game goes, he could get a couple snaps. But if Theo doesn't play, it's going to be a combination of Manhertz and Bellinger. If Theo plays, I think we're going to see very little Bellinger, and we're going to see more Manhertz out of those 2 guys, and then, of course, a lot of Theo. So with the offense, quarterback is, of course, Russell Wilson. I don't think there's going to be any questions there. I don't think we're going to see Jackson Dart. I don't think we're going to see Jameis Winston thrown in there for a play here and there. It is Russell Wilson's offense. It's his job to lose, his opportunity to go out there and score some damn points. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see Russell out there as the starting quarterback for the Giants. I think that he's going to be able to make some plays, and hopefully him and the defense will win us a football game. So moving along to the defense, I think the starting defensive line is going to look like this, left to right. Obviously with Burns and Kayvon, they're going to be rotated on either side. I'm just going to go with Burns on the left and Kayvon on the right. Could go either way. And then as our interior defensive lineman, we of course have Dexter Lawrence. And then I think we're going to see Roy Robertson Harris. He's going to be the first one out there with Dexter Lawrence. Now, we're going to see a lot of Abdul Carter. I just am not so certain that on the first play of the game, he's going to be out there with the ones. I could be wrong on that. I would love nothing more than to see Abdul, Burns, Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence. Like, who doesn't want to see... guys, this is the stuff that makes me excited. Who doesn't want to see that? And I think we're going to see a lot of it. Don't worry. I don't know what Shane Bowen has up his sleeve. I don't know what we're going to see. So let's move along to the linebackers. It's Bobby O, Micah McFadden, no questions asked there. Both of those guys, I'm pretty sure, are healthy and good to go. Next up is the corners. Paulson Adebo. I think we're going to see Cordell Flott as the starting corner opposite Paulson Adebo. There's two reasons why I think that. Number one, Cordell Flott had a very nice showing throughout preseason. When he was on the field and played, he played damn well, and he made plays when he needed to, especially on third down. He didn't get any DPIs, and he did a great job in coverage. The second thing is that if Banks is still limited in practice, which I think there's a possibility that he's going to be limited in practice this week, that's obviously going to affect him. And if he's not getting a ton of reps in the one padded practice that they have, it's going to be Cordell Flott. So we'll see. I could be very wrong on that. Like I said, if that injury report comes out and Banks is good to go, then there's probably a higher possibility that he's the starter opposite of Debo. But this is why we call it a prediction. I am predicting that it's Cordell Flott opposite Paulson Adebo. And then, of course, we all know that Drew Phillips is the slot corner. No questions asked there. I'm also pretty sure that he's a guy that is healthy and ready to go. And then with the safeties, it's going to be Javon Hollins and Tyler Nubin, two guys that I'm also very excited to watch. Nubin has been dealing with something. Of course, no one knows what it is. But he was, I believe, in the most recent padded practices, he was back in some of the team drills. So Nubin is going to be another name to watch when it comes to that injury report. And again, we're going to go through all of this once it comes out. It's hard to fully predict what it's going to look like before we actually see it, again, with Dable being so tight-lipped about everything. But that's where we're at. I think that's what the starting team is going to look like. Graham Gano is, of course, the starting kicker. The long snapper is Casey Kreider. And then the punter is Jamie Gillen. So we did it, guys. We made it to football season. I'm super excited. We're talking all things Giants Commanders all week, every single day. So make sure you subscribe to stay up to date.